in. Thank you so much for joining us. Take it away.
Thank you, Moms Rising, for having me. And yeah, I agree with Kristen. It is encouraging in the most difficult times to be together in solidarity and to know that we have one another to lean on. We are in this together. If you can put up the slide deck, please. We're going to try to do, not try, we're going to do basic know your rights in 7 minutes or less. And the information I'm about to share is basic information about your rights. It is not legal advice. And what's nice about this deck and doing it in 7 minutes is we're going to focus upon the rights that we all have, regardless of our immigration or our citizenship status, and regardless of the law enforcement agency that we are interacting with, because these days it is hard to tell. They're hiding their faces, they're hiding their badges. You don't know who's who out there. And for purposes of this presentation, it doesn't matter. Our rights are the same with all of them. Next slide, please. Basic rights held by all, again, regardless of our immigration and citizenship status. We have a First Amendment right to freedom of speech and to peaceful assembly. Peaceful is actually in the Constitution in the First Amendment. And for me and many of us, nonviolence is a moral principle, but it is also a strategic imperative. If our protests turn violent, we no longer have the protections of the Constitution's afforded to us. We have a right not to be detained or arrested without a valid reason. We're going to talk in a moment about what those reasons look like depending upon what phase of interaction with a law enforcement official you're in. We have the right to refuse to consent to searches of our body, our home, our stuff. And people may have heard about a secret ICE training memo that was leaked by a whistleblower last week. And the one thing I want to say about this, there are some circumstances under which law enforcement can search you or your home without a warrant, emergencies, exigent circumstances. One of those exceptions is not when ICE has an administrative warrant and certain type of immigration information about you. They are illegally training their new hires to violate the Constitution. They will be sued for that. But until such time as a court directs them not to do that unlawful action, our rights remain at risk, and we need to know that they think that they can do that and prepare accordingly. We have the right to remain silent. We have the right to ask for a lawyer if we are detained or arrested. And we got a right to do what I'm doing, which is to tell other people about their rights. And we also have that right if we see somebody in the street who is being mistreated or is being questioned or detained, we have the right to tell them in that moment what their rights are. That is not obstruction. That is not interference. You can't put your body between a police officer and the person to do it. You not need to stand back and not interfere. But we have a First Amendment right to tell other people about their rights. Next slide, please. This is a little bit complicated, but we're still going to try to boil it down to 1 minute or less. It is very important to try to understand when you're in an interaction with a law enforcement official. It is important to try to understand what phase you're in. Police can go up to people and ask them questions. So can ICE. These are sometimes called casual contacts. Nothing feels casual when you're interacting with a law enforcement official, but under the law, these are considered casual contacts. They don't need a good reason to ask you questions. But the point is you don't have to answer them. You don't even have to stay. And it gets to be important to say, am I free to leave? To find out if you're in a casual contact or a stop. A stop is sometimes also called a temporary detention or an investigatory stop, where police or ICE are supposed to have some reasonable suspicion that you are committing an offense. Reasonable suspicion can mean a lot of things. It cannot mean your race or your appearance alone, even though we know that that's what's going on, and there's lawsuits around the country challenging ICE's practices and on grounds that they don't have reasonable suspicion. Again, it's hard to tell whether or not you are free to go or not, and you need to ask the officer, am I free to go? And if you are not, you have to stay. If the officer says you are free to go, then you have the right to let them know I'm leaving now. And then finally, I think the one that we're most familiar with is arrest. In order to arrest you, a enforcement official needs to have probable cause, a much higher degree of suspicion that a offense has been committed. In this situation, you're not free to go and you're going to get detained and booked and sometimes worse. Next slide. A lot of people want to know these days, what type of documentation do I need to carry? In this country, United States citizens are not required by law to carry proof of their citizenship. But I want to recognize that a lot of citizens these days are making the personal choice to do so for their own safety, especially if they believe that other people may perceive them to be foreign. So people of color, people who speak with an accent, are making that safety choice for themselves, even though it's not required. The law, they don't want to be falsely arrested. Um, on the other hand, and really important to know that adult immigrants, immigrants who are 18 or older, who have green cards, which is lawful permanent residency, or some other valid immigration visa, are required to carry their immigration documents with them at all times. And it is often in the interest of immigrants with green cards and other legal immigration visas to show that documentation upon request to avoid further detention, questioning, mistaken identity, and allegations. Next slide, please. A different type of documentation is getting a lot of attention now, which is documentation of ICE activity and the right, whether you have the right to record and document ICE activity. Under the law, you do have a right to document, photograph, film, law enforcement, so long that law enforcement is plainly visible in public. You don't have this right on private property. A private property owner can set the rules of who has a right to record there. But if it's plain and visible in public, you have a right to document law enforcement, so long as you're not trespassing or violating some other law while you're doing it. You want to keep a safe distance and make sure not to physically interfere with an officer. Of course, officers will say you're too close. Keep your distance, step back further, you're interfering. And to be safe, you want to try to take cues and step back a little bit further and get out of the range, even if it's an unreasonable order sometimes to keep a safe distance. I want to note that this is a right that can antagonize law enforcement officials. They can react harshly to those who record their activities. They don't want to be held accountable. They want to be able to lie about what happened without there being any proof to contradict their lies. And those include law enforcement officials who threaten arrest, who make arrest, and who do worse to people. So this is an area where you have to assess your risk tolerance and you have to balance rights and safety. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit more about some safety measures. These are things that tend to reduce risks in inherently risky situations. They reduce risks, they don't eliminate risks completely. You always want to remain calm, avoid sudden movements, keep your hands visible, never do anything that can be interpreted in the least bit as physically resisting or obstructing. This one can be hard. Next one for activists and organizers following orders. When we don't think those orders are reasonable and when we think those orders are unlawful or discriminatory or retaliatory. But if you're prioritizing your safety rather than exercising your rights, then you usually want to try to follow or understand orders and follow them for your safety if that's what you're prioritizing. And finally, I said before, if you're questioned or stopped, you may ask if you're free to leave, and if the answer is yes, you may calmly walk away, and many people would advise narrate that that's what you're doing. Okay, officer, I am walking away, walking in this direction away, so that there's no misunderstanding. Next slide and final slide. I'm going to ask my friends, Kristen, Carrie, Liuba, if you're willing to come off of mute with me. And I know that people are at home and you may feel foolish, like you're talking to yourself when I ask you to repeat after me, but that's okay. If your kids think that you're foolish, it won't be the first time. These are 5 key phrases that we can fall back upon when we forget exactly what our rights are, because they are phrases that can get us out of trouble in the heat of the moment. And let's practice them together. I'm going to ask you at home to repeat after me and also my friends here. Am I free to go?
Am I
Am
free to
I
go?
free to
Am I
go?
free to go?
I wish to remain silent.
I
I
wish
wish
I
to
wish to
remain
remain
silent.
silent.
I do not consent to this search.
I do
I
I
not
do not
consent to
consent to
this
the
search.
search.
Am I under arrest?
Am I under arrest?
And if we have any singers in the house, I want to speak to a lawyer. Come on, all.
I want to
Want
speak
to
to
speak
a
to a
lawyer.
lawyer.
Thank you very much. That's it. I'll turn it back over to our hosts.